Hey guys, welcome to another commentary done by Diggity. This is BSL 20 Hasuleague semi-final between Yuey and Bayaster. Game 1 going to Yuey as Bayaster attempting to go. I actually see the logic behind it, but attempting a early Corsair Reaver, went a little bit light on the Corsair. Reaver did some damage early, but did not do sufficient enough damage to slow Yuey down. Yuey following it up with a Mutalisk swap, catching Bayaster completely off guard and winning the game from there. This is now on Radion, a larger macro-oriented map. I feel like it's out of all of the maps, I feel like this is the most macro-heavy one out of all of them. I'm happy to be corrected on that, but every game I've seen here, how do I put this? Deja Vu, you kind of get trapped into a quadrant. It gets a little bit scrappy from here. Radion, more often than not, seems to turn into these big, long macro matches, presuming there isn't an earlier game bust. Anyway, by the way, Bayaster opting for a pylon at the natural expansion this time. I gotta say, for a minute in the early game, it looked like Bayaster was straight up gonna go Nexus first. Pulling those antics would be a little bit safer on this map, as there's a larger distance. It looks like we are seeing an overpool for Yuey. I actually would not be surprised if he pulls out a 9 pool previously. Initial Overlord is going to bottom left. Looks like the second Overlord making its way top right. We'll have to see if there's additional scouting after that. Bayaster, in the meantime, looks like he's going to get last scout. Actually, is he going to send out double scout with Forge? I think he's going to send... Ooh, going to lose a little bit of time there with the probe doing a weird shift across the building, but it looks like he does want to send out the double scout to try to see whether he can pull off a Nexus as rapidly as possible. Against the overpool here, should be able to get it done on Radion, one of the larger maps. So bring a probe down to hang out near that natural expansion to recognize, and good timing with it to see whether he needs to drop cannons or not. We are likely going to see the 6 Zergling production. That's been pretty typical from Yuey, is the initial 6 Zerglings, but he might opt for a smaller amount. Never mind, going for the initial 4. Do we see the last pair? Resources there? No, going to go for drones. So just going to go for 4 here, which I think makes sense given the distance on this map. It is going to be a Nexus ahead of everything else by actually getting the initial scouting information that he was looking for, drawing that probe back to the main. In the meantime, Yuey having trouble finding his opponent's base, also going to get last scout. Has already got the base going at his natural expansion. The probe following the drone to potentially get an... Ooh, actually, never mind. He was headed out towards the 3 o'clock location. And instead, Yuey's sending it to the 6 o'clock location. I think this is enough distance where it would be challenging for Bayaster to interrupt the 6 o'clock base. But what he wanted to do is try to get in there and create some harassment to make it difficult for that building to get dropped. In the meantime, Gateway, single cannon, no second cannon as of yet. I don't think it's even going to be needed. The Overlord's still a ways away, and the drone still, it looks like a Zergling going to be making its way to the forward front, get scouting that Nexus just moments away from completing. Yuey's gone ahead and blocked off his front as that probe has exited. Wants to try to disguise whether he's going lair or whether he is in fact going to opt for 3-hatch Hydralisk and play it and go potentially for a Hydralisk bust. That's kind of been the go-to for most Zerg these days. Probe taking a few shots here and there, so he's getting pretty... Honestly, I kind of like this play. And Bayaster, so getting a little bit punished for trying to delay that 6 o'clock base, as he's only going to be able to see the drone saturation at the natural expansion. Critically, he's going to be able to keep eyes on that second Vespene Geyser. Usually if that second gas is taken sooner rather than later, you have to know something's up. Cybernetic score, warping in for Bayaster, everything just kind of going normal at this stage of the match. I will be interested to see, so Bayaster thought about Corsair Reaver game 1. Overlord, by the way, from the bottom right, finally making its way into the main, is going to be able to confirm the cybernetic score at the far location. I would be interested to see if Bayaster does something creative again here game 2. In the meantime, Yuey is teching to lair. Lair's about halfway finished between this. I don't think it looks like he's not planning on dedicating any Hydralisks initially, just wants to try to power as many drones as possible in the early stages. A probe and a zealot now joining forces, which should force out a few additional Zerglings. Zergling speed on the way, 2 additional Zerglings being built. 6 o'clock base currently has no defenses. The 4 Zerglings that were already on the field pressing out, but Bayaster at least getting the 2 Zerglings forced out rather than the drone. And it's a little bit surprising, I think, for Yuey potentially, because not often when you see the... I'm not sure if he actually confirmed whether it was Forge first in the front or not. but usually when you have the Forge first, there's just going to be a lighter attack force, so not really taking the attack force seriously. It could also be he brought that Zelda alongside to open up the probe movement, unfortunately losing the probe right there to the Zerglings on the forward field. But in the meantime, Yuey droning pretty heavily is dropping a Spire. Ooh, so going 3. This actually might be 3-hatch Muta here. He hasn't dropped a second gas in the midst of this, but I'm wondering if he evaluated previous positions and recognized a lack of defensive cannons and maybe wanting to go for it. I've heard people say this is all in, but I've seen this work out pretty well. We do have an earlier Dragoon being built, and that will be able to get that Overlord before we see a Gateway, and that might also be in response to this Overlord seeing the Cybernetics core up for such a long period of time and seeing a lack of a Stargate. So I think that might be an adjustment here for Yuey, where he's like, okay, you know what? If you're not going to go any air defense, I'm just going to go ahead and pile on a lot of Corsair. It looks like a 4th hatchery and a 2nd gas are being added on. Yuey does have a brief supply cap. The probe able to get a look at that natural expansion. He's probably going to presume that it's, well, actually, it looks like I thought Yuey with the Spire and the Lair Tech and no Hydralisk in the midst of this and not going for the hatchery before all this was going to go for potentially a Mutalisk, and he has built the resources to go ahead and plant. Okay, there he's building the Mutalisk. I was about to say, is he in fact going for it? Because he plopped that hatchery down at the natural expansion, but I think Bayaster saw the gas. So maybe in the midst of this, we'll see if he recognizes the potential threat or not. In the meantime, Zealot and Dragoons making the way across on the map. We have 4 gateways underneath this. It's going to require a lot of Dragoons to provide the defense. He's also going to need some cannons behind this, and the Dragoons are going pretty far afield. So either Bayaster needs these units to absorb a lot of damage of the Mutalisk in the forward front while some additional defenses are plopped down, or he's going to end up with a lot of damage potentially wrought on his main or natural expansion as the Mutalisks are able to bypass his initial offenses. But right now staging, and I've seen this before, I was about to say with +1 and I didn't realize that +1 had finished, but yeah, it's going to be kind of a +1 Dragoon flood. I've seen this built a handful of times before. Not in this particular situation. It looks like some Sunken colonies getting dropped to try to defend against this. Dragoons making the way. It looks like they're going to pull back and make the way to the 6 o'clock location. We have a handful of Sunken colonies there, but also the Mutalisks are making the way across the map, and we still don't have, we're going Citadel of Doom. We have nothing. We have no air defenses right here. This is going to be disastrous for Bayaster, potentially. Zerglings flooding their way across, getting blocked by their own Sunken colony briefly. One Sunken colony down, second one not merged, but in the meantime, the Mutalisks completely wiping out the probe line. Or I should say, forcing back the probe line to the natural expansion. We do have a cannon at the low side corner. Dragoons spawning, so they might be dealt with there. Drones pulling off the lines to try to defend themselves at the 6 o'clock location. And this actually might end up in Bayaster's favor. It looks like the Mutalisks are going to be repelled by the Dragoons and their +1. The drone's not able to defend here at the 6 o'clock. And this is an overwhelming amount of Dragoons now. And that, I think that might be game. Going to be able to kill the hatcheries here at the 6 o'clock location. The Mutalisks drawing back. So Dragoons spawning and Yuey not able to get the damage he was looking for. Also not able to hold the 6 o'clock. Is building more Mutalisks, trying to make the best of it. No hatcheries have died yet. Has lost a good amount of mining time and some drones, however. Looks like the Dragoons are going to get surrounded by Zergling Muta in the midst of this. Zergling Muta actually does very, very well against Mutalisks because they can't target. They have trouble targeting both locations at once, trying to start a fire and make their way out of this. But this might be sufficient numbers for Yuey to break through. Bayaster doing his best. This is also buying him some time to, well, he's not dropping a cannon behind this. I was about to say, I guess he doesn't need to buy time at this stage because it's more Yuey who needs to redraw and get some defenses back up, particularly at the 6 o'clock location, if on another round of reinforcements. I'm going to call Bayaster ahead at this stage pretty significantly, actually, on a redraw. I'm gonna go back and do the commentator thought right now. I just felt like what was going to happen there is that Yuey was going to successfully defend the 6 o'clock with some Zerglings, and then he was going to wreak some damage here at the main. So maybe it is, I'm going to redraw everything I thought about 3-hatch Mutalisks potentially now. Able to push it back with just Dragoons. Speaking of which, Dragoons engaging the Mutalisks mid-corner. It looks like Bayaster has enough Dragoons in large enough numbers with that +1 weapons. +1 weapons finished by the on the Mutalisks as well. A lot of Mutalisks out here, but Bayaster pushing Yuey back. We have 3 Sunken colonies in the 6 o'clock, 2 additional Sunken colonies, but not a lot of defense otherwise, and has not really been able to get back up and running. Mutalist driving the way back across. But Bayaster, I was about to say, what Bayaster can do in the midst of this is while he's got effectively map control and Yuey on the back foot, he can establish that third base, which is a big turn for any Protoss competitor. Whenever you can establish that third, it really changes the state of the game for Zerg players. In the meantime, I think Psystorm was upgraded. We have some cannons that are being built at the main. We've been sitting on 4 gateways for a long period of time. Yuey rushing forward with a lot of Zerglings. Bayaster redrawing the Dragoons back into his main right this second. Going to redraw. Yuey's managed to actually stabilize his losses fairly well. Some High Templar at high risk of getting picked off based on their spawn time. Yeah, being spotted immediately morphing to Archon. Nice bit of micro there from Bayaster. So loses 2 High Templar as far as energy and Sidestorm goes, but it's not a total loss. He's at least going to get an Archon out of it. But things restabilizing a bit for both players. Yuey managed to defend the 6 o'clock location. Yuey was able to push back the Dragoons overall. Bayaster still in a pretty good economic position. He's also got that base making its way top left. Yuey drawing up some Mutalists to go ahead and assault that natural expansion, getting a good shot right there. Able to kill A-Pro, wants to try to slow down Bayaster's economy. Some Dragoons are holding in the line to try to do what damage they can, kind of act like mobile cannons. You've got an Archon alongside the Dragoon, and this will shred through. The Archon added to this pack, the splash damage, just absolutely annihilates Mutalisks in bundled groups, and they also chew through Zerglings very, very rapidly with a 30+3, but just pop Zerglings. Pop them like zits, that lovely visual. Psystorm being upgraded, by the way, so I guess the morphing of the Archon's not that big a loss anyway, because it was going to be well, I'll still call it a loss, because usually, I think you generally as Protoss, you want Psystorm over Archons at large, just Psystorm's so valuable. Additional Sutton colonies getting dropped from Yuey. Went for some heavy drone cycling in the midst of this, so it was going up to 51 workers off 3 bases. It looks like he's already got a drone out to maybe grab a 4th base. Bayaster has a few workers here top left, but has not been able to escort a large reinforcing force of probes out to that location yet. Is still sitting at just 6 gateways. Hasn't gotten the larger gateway flood across 3 bases that he's potentially looking for. Reinforcements are going to take a little bit of damage as they're streaming across, but I'm not sure. Okay, Yuey now spots the very sizable army careening down at his natural expansion. I don't think he's got enough to hold this. +2 armor, by the way, gonna finish probably after this fight is complete, but that's gonna be a dead hatchery, a dead lot else. Some lurkers. Are these lurkers? No, these are hydralists. Lurker tech, I think, was skipped in the midst of this because to make space for the Mutalist. The Archon taking some damage with some bad micro there. Now trying to make its way back through. Mutalist now engaging on top of that Archon, and yeah, I think Yuey's going to get busted here at the natural expansion. Too many Dragoons. The Archon's doing a lot of damage. Dragoon, yeah, all the reinforcing troops to try to clear this up from the 6 o'clock have been now cleared out. And this is going to be at least a dead hatchery with a bit of focus fire. And we also have another group, looks like mostly High Templar. We can have reinforcements on this, no problem. So Bayaster able to overwhelm Yuey here in game 2. Hydralisks doing some good damage as far as the follow-up here. Getting good damage done. +1, yeah, and there's GG, well played. A bit of a rocky, we're seeing kind of a rocky back and forth series in the making here. And it looks like Yuey going to drop this one. So we're now going to be tied 1 apiece in the semifinal. Hope you guys have enjoyed it regardless. Thanks for listening.